Whoops, sorry. Way to kick off the episode.
Wow, I love that music.
Wrong button.
It's like kind of an ASMR vibe. Anyway, good morning. You're not imagining it. Me, Michelle Bruno. I'm opening up the show under duress, but I'm here with Liz King Caruso and Dalia El-Ghazar. I don't have nicknames for them. And of course, Robert Dunsmore, creative director to royalty, to the gods and goddesses, to, I don't know, independent event organizers the world over. Welcome, our lifeline, Robert. And I want to kick off and welcome to our geniuses who'll be joining us as we go through the show. Robert, my first question to you is, what is a freelance creative director? And how do you do that job?
Well, the creative director is the storyteller, the person who makes up the narrative for the event. So the event has to be turned into an experience. And as we've all experienced before, we know that our industry is very logistic, very infrastructure based. So the idea is that to make sense of what's happening to an audience, you have a story or a narrative or a theme that is the context for everything that's happening. And so the context is for everyone. And then you've got all of this lovely content that happens along the way, which is all hyper personal. And if you get that right, then your audience will turn into participants and they will join your event. And that's the job of the creative director, to actually stimulate that audience to become participants.
So are business to business event organizers hiring you? Are they doing that? Are they creating narratives behind the event that you can build an infrastructure, an exhibition industrial complex around?
Very few. There's a couple of events that do that, like C2 perhaps, where they very much do build a story around everything, and then that's how they deliver the experience to their audience. Money 2020 do the same thing, where they have, collisions and things that they allow people far more control over what's going on. A bit nearer that festivalization that Skift have talked about in the past. Generally speaking, no, of course people don't do that. It's a straightforward logistics, infrastructure-based thing, and we can get so much more value out of all of that spend if we were to put a bit of story, a bit of narrative, and make it easier for the audience to understand.
It seems so straightforward. Sorry. It seems so straightforward to do this, to think more strategically, to tell a story. I think that we know that events bring people together and that a story helps them to have an experience. You mentioned right before we went live that we have to stop calling them events and start calling them experiences. And I believe it. And yet I also experience what you're talking about, which is that very few corporations are really thinking about that, let alone doing that. So I'm curious, from your vantage point, what you're seeing in terms of like, why? What are the big hurdles that prevent, other than, we are used to doing it the way we've always done it, which we talk about on the show all the time?
Post-pandemic, last year, whatever year that was, 2022, we saw a tremendous amount of, there was a real great demand for creativity and a great demand to do things differently, because event owners and brands were very respectful of people's time, and they really wanted to make sure that time was well spent, and they had to attract them, because everyone had got to the stage where it's very easy to just push a button and turn off and walk away. Mm-hmm. And so there was a big boost in creativity, a big boost in ideas, a big boost in stories, because the stories cut through all the noise of everything that's going on all the time. And it gives an identity to an event or an experience. Beginning of this year, that's happened a little bit less, because in my little tiny experiment of working with lots of agencies and event owners, they didn't make as much money as they wanted to, or things cost more, and the cost of everything going up, that they've really pulled back on it and tried to sort of make money out of things they're doing, and tried to make it more commercial. product. Sooner or later, they're going to have to go back to the storytelling. They're going to have to go back to the creativity, because that's the only way you're going to get audiences to turn up, particularly with new demographics and younger audiences. They do want everything to be experiences. And so we will get more experience led. They'll scream and shout and try not to, but we will become more experience led.
So what happens if they don't do that fast enough and they still depend on their annual from one year to another, and then all of a sudden, they'll come back to a huge convention center with the same old program of like same old, same speakers, same everything, and crickets. Nobody's going to show up.
Well, if they want new audiences, they can't carry on doing things in an outdated way for an outdated audience that no longer exists. The working populace of the globe is much younger than it used to be. It's millennial, 54%, and then that's gradually going to be very quickly replaced by a newer audience, and that audience is experience hungry, and they will not put up with the same old stuff. They will not put up with hearing the same things. They want to have their own voice and their own control. So events that don't become experiences are in serious, what they're going to do. They're going to just wait for their audience to get older and older and older. How are they going to refresh that audience? Yeah. So unless they change and embrace new ways of communicating with that audience that's relevant to that audience, then they will wither on the vine.
So I'm curious, how do you go about like walking in, and I see you with dark glasses and walking slow-mo, like inside of a company, like Armageddon style, like, and then you have your posse or something with you. How do you get
my own DJ around with me? My beats are going. Yeah.
That's exactly how I roll too.
There you go.
That's exactly.
No,
I love
that's not no. The reality is this. The reality is that an agency or an event owner or whatever will resist change, and they will resist employing creatives because they think they cost money, and nobody wants to pay for creative ideas. Not really. So, we're a media. It's the media space is where the money is, and the media production is where the money is. So what actually happens in reality is that a brief is sat on for maybe 7 days, possibly more, and then panic sets in, and that's when you call in freelancers. Yeah. And whereas you would have had 14 days to do something, you've got maybe 7 or 6 or 3.
So when you go in, how do you change that dynamic? Like, how do you change the urgency? Like lighting up, basically fire under their asses for them.
By coming up with an idea very, very quickly.
That's what I was just thinking about.
Entire solution. It's not the entire solution. What you have to do is you have to disseminate a brief. A brief is made of words, and an average brief might have 11, 12, 1,500 words that are around the concept delivery. You have to take that 1,500 words, break it down into the 30, 40, 50 words that really matter, and then you deal with those 30 or 50 words, and you worry about the other 1,250 afterwards. And so that will be, this is the story, this is the idea, this is the purpose of the meeting, this is the identity of the meeting or the concept. This is the community that you're trying to deliver the experience to, and then you join those things together. And as I've always said, if we get all of the issues agreed upon, then we can have an idea that deals with the issues, then we can all work on delivery.
So you don't just come in and go, it should be yellow. Everything should be yellow.
No.
And here's my invoice for like 400K. No?
No. That would be so dreamy, would it? Okay, let's do an experiment then. Let's just do a straightforward thought experiment. There was the mention of festivalization before, and you mentioned trade fairs that won't change. So how do we festivalize a trade fair? There you go. That's a small one.
Very tiny one.
So give me a brief.
Get rid of the booths.
Yeah.
Remove the tables and the walls and the hallways.
Yeah.
So
And
no booths, no
right. I think
tables,
that,
no hallways. Yeah,
right.
carry on.
The narrative has to go in the other direction, away from commodity and huge numbers and vanilla, toward intimacy, vibrancy, smaller spaces, events within events, and relationship building.
And trade shows are very much about what the people in the booth need. They need people walking by their booth. So the whole thing is designed around that. It's not designed around an attendee who needs to find a new product for their event. That's not, if that's what you're looking for, that's not how you're going to find it, is walking the halls of a massive trade show.
I think what we're disrupting here is the exchange of information as well as what Liz was saying, meaning the exhibitors or sponsors that come in, they have a need to exchange what their product or their services are about. And the buyers or the attendees have a need to, or sometimes they don't even know they have that need, but they have a need to communicate what they are looking for and don't want to be oversold on things they are not caring about at the moment.
Okay. I'm going to take Michelle's event within an event, because that's something that we can actually genuinely do something with. You know that a trade fair or an exhibition type environment, already they've sold all the space based on last year's plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And their entire revenue comes from selling that space. So we're not going to be able to change that overnight. We're going to have to change that gradually over maybe 2 shows or 2 editions or iterations of a trade fair. So we're starting off, we are going to have, booths of some description. We are going to have corridors of some description, and we are going to have that infrastructure exchange that you described there, Dahlia. But then if we apply Michelle's event within an event, and so we take the festivalization-y typey thing that we were looking at, and if we think of it from the point of view of the people coming to the show rather than the point of view of the people who have paid to be at the show, because it's actually about the audience that's coming in and turning them into participants. So fine, we might have booths of some description. We might be able to do better than that. And we are going to have, it's going to be recognizable as an exhibition type trade show-ish event in the first iteration. And then what we're going to do is we're going to plant something which will gradually take over the entire show and do away with all of that you've had before. So the first thing is, if we're going to borrow from festivals so that we make it applicable and relevant to a younger audience, let's use the language of festivals. So the first thing I'll take is a symbol or an identity, because we're trying to change the identity of the trade fair. It's still a trade fair, but we're trying to change the experience of it. So it needs a second identity for this event, Michelle's event within an event. So on festivals, and we do it on shows all the time, that when you've got the stage and you spike the stage with a bit of tape, right? So you've got that gaffer tape X. We're going to use that. That's going to be the symbol for Michelle's event within the event. We're going to have a gaffer tape X. Now, wherever you see that X on the floor, that's extra content. So it's extra content for the actual event in the first place. So if we take, this is good. This is
great.
Okay, so maybe there'll be an app, maybe whatever, I don't know. There'll be something other like that. And so we take that X, that spike X, and it's nothing. And so you're walking around. There's the normal halls, there's the normal corridors, and there's what color do we want our X to be? What color is our gaffer tape?
Purple.
Okay, so we've got a purple gaffer tape X on the floor, or occasionally on a wall, or occasionally on a door. We're making this up as we go along. I mean, come on, let's
sounds
get through
great.
this.
I love how your brain is grinding.
Yeah, but here, but then if we've got an app and the app has got the floor plan, and the floor plan has got, say, a dozen purple X's on it. You know, some might be on a wall, some on a floor, whatever. There has to be a way or a time within the time frame, the timeline of the show, that we turn those X's on. So there is, the show's going on like it normally is, and maybe at 10 a.m., one of the purple X's that's in a given corridor will suddenly go to on. And all that happens is you have a crew, and you have your extra crew who turn up all dressed in black. And if they're going to do a pop-up talk, they turn up with like 6 seats. And in front of that X, there's 6 seats in front of it. Someone turns up and talks, the camera turns up, the light turns up, and for 10 minutes, that X is live. It's been turned on, and it delivers some form of content that's a pop-up piece of content. Now, expand that further. Then throughout the day, throughout every day, as well as the actual exhibition that is going on with the corridors, with the normal booths, all that sort of stuff, there will be this disruptive, because Darlene, you asked for disruptive. Michelle, you asked for an event within an event. And Liz, you asked for a story narrative. So there will be a story within the story. There will be an event within the event. And we keep turning on these purple X's until a different bit of content is delivered on the hour, every 30 minutes, or whatever we want to be. And then we start to get, if we expand that a little bit further. So if we take our purple spikes, and what if you were to go outside the hall and there's a parking lot, and then the purple X that's on the floor in the street by the parking lot suddenly becomes live on the app, and we have people, we have our crew, our
Men in black
crew. They're on top of the parking lot, and they can drop like snacks and little purple plastic parachutes. Little plastic
or with drones.
Parachutes floating down, and you've got like, you know, you've got little snacks or drinks or whatever it is that you want it to be. And so if you're there for that time, you get one of those things. There might be 2 flavors, you know, you've got lemon or you've got orange, you've got and everyone hands them out, and then there'll be something else will happen. So inside the hall, during maybe like a coffee break time, we could have a singer or a performer or a DJ or a silent disco, or we could have someone who has spoken on one of the stages might suddenly appear somewhere. So all the time, all the way through it, we are landscaping another event within an event, and then gradually the content from that event within the event will be more interesting than the overall trade fair. It's all context to whatever the trade fair is about. But if that's more interesting, then gradually that will take over, and the audience will demand more of that, and gradually you actually get rid of the main floor and change everything else until you finally got your festivalized trade fair, where maybe that you might find that, you know, most halls have got like doors to other places and corridors and stuff like that. So you've got a purple X on the door. And then when that one becomes live, once people understand that you follow the X's around, people will stop following the corridors and the layout of the plan, and they'll start following the content X's while you're delivering a story and narrative to them. And if they go to a door, and it might look like a door to a cupboard or something.
Bruno's tickled right now. Bruno's like,
yeah, I totally am. I'm thinking event directors everywhere are shitting their pants right now.
I mean, this is amazing. Plus the whole idea
is paper, and we've gone off.
Hang on. I mean, then you can actually incentivize those that become part of the X experiences. And if they actually, like, you know, blow it up on social media, etc., they get extra something. Whether
because they've discovered it, they own it.
Extra whatever they want, or extra content, or an extra hour with you, because holy shit, that was a transformation in like less than 10 minutes. So yeah, I'm
But you left out the part where then it's done in complete darkness, like those dinners where you're just eating and it's dark and people are groping around trying to it's be fun.
That was fantastic.
Why don't we? But eating in the dark, Michelle, let's do that. But say you go into the adjoining hall. Yeah. So you go into the adjoining hall, and you know, like you have campfires and stuff like that. We'll literally just have tents in there. Mm-hmm. But all the tents will be blacked out.
Yes.
Or flashlights.
There you go. Purple light.
Only if you
UV.
jump through these hoops, then you get a flashlight.
In the dark with UV
Oh,
purple light.
UV, so that you can have like secret code, like messages on the tent, like walls and stuff. Hey,
But they will be sponsored messages, so you can charge for
boom, sponsored messages. All right,
it. Sponsor the bars.
Liz, I think we have our first cut the shit show like experience. I'm
I'm
sorry.
thinking the X and Texi talk.
Yes.
Why not? Yeah.
So that's fantastic. Holy crikey. Sean is like brainstorming at a whole other level. That is so true. That like, honestly, do you do that with all your clients?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but I mean, we just did it now because you gave an intelligent brief.
Yeah, sometimes you don't get an intelligent brief, do you?
Yeah.
It's easier to do when you've got an intelligent brief with clear objectives and you understand what the issues are. It's going to be easier to come up with the ideas quicker.
So I know from the audience and the geniuses in the audience right now, and I know from all of us as well, you usually get a client who's like, need to disrupt, need to do something different, need to do, I love what you brainstorm. It's a holy shit moment, all of that. And then they slowly but surely talk themselves out of it, or they talk themselves out to a point where they literally go back to what they had. What do you do with those people?
But if you've given them, if they've expressed their issues to you clearly, like you did with your brief, and then I give you the idea back. The idea really is just a bit of gaffer tape on the floor, isn't it? That's the actual idea. The fact that there is a purple spike, and every time you see a purple spike, it delivers a new form of content. They might not do the tents in the dark with the UV lights and stuff like that, but they'll do the safer ones. So if you go too far, it gives them the illusion of control.
How do you address the
I hope no clients are watching this.
What?
I hope no clients are watching this.
How do you live on the internet forever?
I hope potential clients are watching this. But Robert, how do you address where people like get stuck in their own way? And it's usually around, this is going to cost me a ton of money, and I don't know how to even explain ROI or relate ROI to my usual stakeholders. Oh my God, IBM and Johnson & Johnson will never fall for an tape on a stage. That won't fly with them, kind of thing. Like, so how do you, maybe my question to you is, how do you empower or arm the event organizer or director with like the business explanations, business case explanations, is that this would apply or this would work really well because of what's that because of?
Well, first and foremost, they rarely have good data. And so they wouldn't really know a lot of good data when they saw it anyway. And so they'll have a target audience, a target demographic. And if that demographic is shrinking, the normal response would be to add another show to it so it looks like it's growing, even though it's possibly not. So you have to interpret the story in terms of relevance to that particular demographic. So in the trade fair thing, we had to use something which was relevant to a younger audience that wants an experience, and the experience that all of them have shared already is maybe going to a festival or something other like that, which is why you use the language of a festival, so that there is some relevance to that experience. So you would break it down into the numbers. So what we actually have is we have a trade fair that works for the minority of people that always want it to work like it wants to, but then you've also got an idea that is going to bring in a new audience, or that is going to be relevant to a new audience if you can bring them in, if you can market to them. And also by disguising the marketing as a festival or as entertaining in some way, or surprising or curious or experiential in some way, you're disguising the marketing, because nobody wants to be marketed to and no one wants to be sold, and you aren't sold to wittingly within that festival environment. You're exposed to things, but you're not sold to. So it's changing everything for a particular demographic so that it makes sense to them. You're reaching behind the backs of your clients to their audience. If they become participants, your event will grow.
What is the language of festivalization, of festivals?
I don't know, really. It was the language is it's the physical identity of it, and the identity is that you're going there out of choice, that you are going to be entertained, that you have some familiarity with what you're seeing, and you have some control. You choose which dance tent you go to or which act you go to. So you have the illusion of control again, even though someone has curated it all for you. You have that illusion of control.
I think there's an element of emotion evoked with festivals, because when you go with an experience that really focuses on the senses, especially when it has music or it has, like the food trucks and the food, and it's the smells, and it's like the people that you are, even if you don't know them. I think there's this whole elation and emotion that happens when you're at a festival and you're enjoying your favorite band, or you are experiencing a brand new type of music. And when you look at festivals, and okay, so I go to raves quite a bit, and definitely I'm probably the oldest in this crowd, but I end up in a club where everybody at a certain moment is bouncing at the same time, singing at the top of their voice, like their lungs, and they're just having an amazing time. And then there's this whole connection that happens, even with strangers. And I think that it evokes this like instant friendship and instant happiness that happens. And that's what people want at our traditional shows. How many times do we actually go to a conference because I know that I'm going to have breakfast or coffee with Liz and Michelle? I don't care about the shitty content. I know I'm going to end up in the hallway most of the time because I can't get into breakout sessions anymore. And but that for me is enough sometimes. So I think that Bruno, to your question, is the language of the festivalization. It actually should be that every organizer should look at what is their language for their experiences that they want to evoke for each of the stakeholders. They need to reset that right now. You can't keep saying you're going to come and network and connect and educate and blah, blah, blah. No more. I honestly think
want so much more than that. They want that shared experience and that feeling of belonging that you've just described. And also, when you go to a festival and you see a band playing, when they play the big number at the end, and there's 20,000 people there, there's 20,000 people singing that song. That's 20,000 versions of the same song. And then at the end of it, the band wave and they get a standing ovation for the song that the audience has just sung them. Now, can we do that at an event, please?
That would be so freaking cool. Liz, wouldn't that be awesome? All of a sudden you have a standing ovation at Texie Talk and everybody's like, actually reading your last slide for you.
Yeah, I think that's what's so hard for like corporate events is to think about how to do that. It's like, great, sounds good when there's a big, huge band involved and dancing. And to Dana's point, she said, question, what's the actual difference between a festival and trade show? Bouncing and sync. It's just hard to imagine how to do that and achieve business objectives. I think it's totally possible, but it involves so much of thinking outside the box. And I wanted to go back to, Irina had a question a while ago. Existing events have a big challenge to adapt and change. It's risky, it's time consuming. There's all kinds of reasons why. And in some cases, maybe it's just easier to create something new and just innovate from the start, because the challenge that you mentioned, even with these trade shows, is that they have to do it over time. They have to make small changes and kind of like, tease people down the route.
And it's totally true. It's totally true. The
Yeah.
risk for them not to take the risk is actually higher and bigger.
And it's growing.
The way
absolutely.
that,
Or
Robert,
whether they believe that.
yeah, but the way Robert was this, like his brainstorming was like, holy shit. But like, you are truly looking at a conference that had a bit of it the traditional way, and a huge bit of it the new way, and that's really
At first. But Robert, what you said is eventually it will evolve into the other new giant X way.
But it was your idea, Michelle. You said an event within an event.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's not really my idea, but that's what I would want.
That was the process. That was the process that is going to work. The fact that you can have something that exists and you grow something new within it, that then overtakes it. That's fine. That actually was that was reasonably practical.
Mm-hmm.
Love this.
Well, I am spent.
No, this was fantastic. I mean, it is very eye-opening. I do think that, event organizers, especially corporate event organizers, as well as associations, to be very honest, they have to start rethinking totally outside of the box. I mean, they're tasked to do it every single year. And yet I see them slowly going back to their comfort zone, which I think, like even a brainstorming session that Robert just did, like within 15 minutes, and it was Bruno's idea. Bruno, it was your idea. You have to take credit for it.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
I've got lots more where that came from.
So we can do lots more brainstorming. Any other?
No, Liz, you have to go.
By all means, don't let me stop the conversation.
Does anybody have any other questions for Robert? Katrina says excitement and participation. Boom. That's what she wants. There you go.
I'm really intrigued by something you said, Robert. We have to think about, or we should think about, trade shows as media. And it brings up just an interesting sort of thought process in my mind about thinking differently about, trade events. Why do we have to think about them as, buyer seller marketplaces and leave it at that? Can't we think of them differently? Can't we think of them as media? Can't we think of them as, experiences, like you said? Why don't we do that? I mean, if we can change our frame of reference, I think we can be more creative.
No doubt about that, because they're set in stone in old ways, producing things the way they've always done. Because it's a really difficult thing to do, to produce several thousand square feet of trade fair, and so people are resistant of changing, and it self-perpetuates because as soon as it's done, you're selling the floor plan to the same people for the same time, and that's your only objective, is to sell the same space to that person all over again, or a slightly bigger space if you're lucky. And that traps itself. It's like being stuck in your own house and never actually leaving. You don't learn that the world has changed. So that's like why your event within the event idea, kind of, that there's a lifeblood there that could actually physically work. Because if you say throw everything away and let's start again from scratch, nobody will do that. Mm-hmm. But whereas if you grow something that eventually takes over, TikTok will take over from Google, or ChatGPT will take over from other search engines. This is how things happen. Something else grows through what was already there, and it takes over and it becomes the new, and then something new again. So we have to keep on revitalizing it and making it relevant to a new audience that are going to come along. And so we have to speak in their language, which is where this kind of thing kind of works.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. This was fantastic.
Okay, you had me at X. You had me at purple X.
You had me at X.
Right there, it was just like
blink.
I couldn't stop.
That would be our new T-shirts in London, Robert. We got this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to print over the old ones. I'm going to print over the old ones with a new. So like when you go to the festival and you've got all the. I'm just going to print them over again and again and again.
Or just put gaff tape. We'll do like real gaff tape. Do you know what we should do? We should have an X like little cube area where people come, and if they need a brainstorm of some kind, we do one of those little hourglasses. They give us their brief and we see if we give them new ideas.
A design sprint.
Yes. Look at her face.
I was just sitting there thinking of, how people collect all the badges from all the events they've ever been to from the beginning of time. I don't know what that means. I probably have them somewhere.
I do too. That would be fantastic. All right,
we're doing it. Built into it too.
If anybody that's listening loves the idea, you gotta tell us if you love the idea. What we're doing a design sprint. I love it. Robert, thank you, sir, for being on the show.
Thank you, ladies.
Please come back.
Yes. Please come back.
After we've blown out the whole purple X thing, then we can move on to something else.
But this has been fantastic, and I hope everybody that's listening or everybody that's going to listen to it on demand gets some idea of it. Sean, I know you are loving it. Joanne as well. We love it as well. So thank you for being our guest. And thanks everyone for attending Cut the Shit, Cue the Genius show. And we have upcoming topics. Live from Event Tech Live. We're going to do a live session from Event Tech Live Las Vegas next week. Can't wait for that. We will be at the Tech to Grow Collective. Ask us on LinkedIn what that is about. And May 4th, advice from brands, how to get that coveted event ROI. This is going to be an interesting one because we're not going to settle for the KPIs the vanilla KPIs that everybody has as well. Mm-hmm. May 11th, building your personal brand, being the celebrity CEO of your industry. And May 18th, why is event AV so freaking expensive? I think a lot of people are going to, this will resonate with a ton. And if you have any topics, if you want to be a guest on the show, please reach out. We would love to have you on the show or be part of the guest sprint as well. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful weekend. Holy cow.